Hello, everybody. My name is Jenna Woodard, and today I am going to be going through the structured interview training. So, the first thing that we're going to cover is the learning objectives. By the end of this training, you will know what the definition of a structured and an unstructured interview is. So, we're going to be talking about specifically what the definitions are, and also we're going to kind of compare and contrast some things that we see when we're looking at structured and unstructured interviews. Um, you will be able to create situational and experience-based questions for a structured interview. So in order to achieve this learning objective, we will be doing a activity where we create two situational and two experience-based questions so that going forward, you can create your own for your company and what best suits the jobs that you are looking to hire for. You'll be able to create a benchmark response for situational and experience-based questions that you design. So once again, we're going to do an activity where we kind of look at creating a benchmark response and a rating scale. These things you will be able to also take to your company, utilize them so that you can hire to the best of your ability for the position that you're looking to fill. Um, we'll go over, what does an excellent benchmark response look like versus an average response versus a response that is poor. So we're going to look at many different areas of the benchmark response. You will also be able to use a rating scale to rate the responses received by future candidates, and based on the results, determine if they are eligible for hire. So we're going to look at the 1 to 5 point rating scale so that people can determine if this is somebody that they would like to hire in their company or not. You will have an understanding of a 30-day plan to implement structured interviews. So by the end of this course, I will be helping you understand what 30-day plan you can create to use structured interviews at your own company. What does the process look like? What do you need to do in 30 days to be able to completely use structured interviews to help you hire people? How is this relevant to HR? So we're going to look at several different areas that tell us why are structured interviews relevant. How can you use them in HR? So the first thing is that structured interviews improve hiring accuracy because they have a high validity. So this is going to help you be able to hire the person that is best for the job, um, because these questions are tailored towards finding somebody who meets the criteria that has been set forth by the company and for what areas they're looking to fill. The second thing is that they increase reliability and consistency. So, the thing about structured interviews is they are used across the board. They are used for every person that they interview. And so, this makes them reliable and consistent. It does not change, it is always the same, it is a constant. The third one is that they reduce bias and promote fairness. So we all have an implicit bias that we naturally have. This helps reduce that bias. So you are no longer hiring somebody based on a personal preference. You are hiring them based on the scale that you have created to hire the best person. And by doing this, you are promoting fairness because you are using a standard method that everybody is going to use. It's not going to be something that changes based, from candidate to candidate. It is the same across the board, which is really great for promoting fairness. The next one is that they are more legally defensible. So being able to help your company stay legally sound is very important. And one of the ways that you can achieve this is by using structured interviews, because with a structured interview, once again, it is the same across the board. It is the same for every person. And so this reduces the bias and it promotes fairness, like we talked about before. So they also promote strategic staffing. So by using these, you are coming up with a plan to hire the best possible candidate for the job. 6, they enable easier interviewing training. So this is also something that is important because whenever you are using a structured interview, this is something that is already pre-planned. You know the questions that you're going to ask, you know the rating scale, and you know exactly what you're looking for based on the rating scale that you have in place. So this just makes it easier. You're going to have an easy training system set up that explains how to do these things so that anybody that comes across it can be successful in doing it. They integrate well with other HR systems. So, structured interviews, they are going to help the HR team hire somebody who is best for the job. So now we're going to have a poll. This is just something that I will ask you to type down in the chat. So the question is, what type of interview do you currently use in your place of employment? So you can just write down a quick response, letting everybody in the chat know this is what I use at my job. It doesn't have to be an elaborate thing, but just type it down below so that we can get an idea and a consensus of what is currently being utilized at your company. And I will give you a couple minutes to type it down in the comments. Okay, so in this portion, everybody would type in the comments what they are using. I would look at the chat and say, okay, these are some of the responses that I'm seeing. This is seems to be a common response. This seems to be a response that I don't really see a lot of. And then from this point, we would move forward because we're just trying to kind of use a very basic question. Okay, so now we're going to talk about structured interviews versus unstructured interviews. So, what is a structured interview? A structured interview is a standardized interview where all candidates are asked the same question in the same order. The interviewer uses a defined scoring rubric to rate the answer received by the candidate. This allows for a more fair and concise way to hire potential employees. So basically, structured interviews, they are something that the company comes up with. They're comprised of several different questions that are used in every single interview. And let's say that we're hiring for a very specific job. So, for that specific job, every candidate that we would interview, we would use these same questions and it would be rated by the same rating scale. So, that is how it is structured. That's why it's called structured, because it's the same across the board. What is an unstructured interview? An unstructured interview is a free-flowing conversation. There are no set questions asked, and there is no set rubric to rate the interview. The interview is improv. So once again, this would be the interviewer would have the candidate come into the office. They would have just a conversation. They may throw in some questions here and there, but across the board, it's very different. So, what they ask one person, they probably will not ask the same question to the next person that comes in to interview for the same job. A lot of times, There's no rating scale. So a lot of times the way that the interviewer decides is just based on feeling or kind of what they thought of the person. Now, this is problematic because it allows for a lot of bias. We all, once again, have that implicit bias that is ingrained in us. We think things about people that we come into contact without even realizing it. And so when we have that, this is a way to make our company not be legally safe because somebody can come in and say, well, I was interviewed in this manner. And then the other person will say, well, I was interviewed in this manner. And then they will realize that there may be some unfairness there, whether the interviewer even realizes it or not. And that is very problematic. And so these are just kind of some differences that we see here. So the next thing we're going to look at is a chart that kind of compares and contrasts structured interviews. So we're going to go over several different features that we could come across and what does this look like for a structured interview and what does this look like for an unstructured interview. So the first thing is consistency. With a structured interview, consistency is very high. This is because, once again, this is a standard set of questions. It is asked to every single person the same exact way. It is rated with a very specific rating scale and benchmark questions. So that keeps it consistent and fair. With unstructured interviews, the consistency is very low because it varies from person to person. One conversation that somebody might have with one interviewee might be very different from the next interviewee. And so there is really no consistency. You know, one person, they may have more banter and not really a lot of questions asked about how they would perform their job. And another person, it may just be a very basic conversation where they focus more on how they would handle the job. And so that's why the consistency is not there. Really, it's very low. The next thing is predictive validity. For a structured interview, it is high. For an unstructured interview, it is low. We also have bias risk. We have a very low bias risk with a structured interview. This is because with structured interviews, there is a less chance of your bias coming through because the questions are already set in place. You already know what type of answer you're looking for as an excellent answer versus a poor answer. And based on those responses, you can rate it on a rating scale. And then that is going to determine who is the best candidate for the job. So it's no longer really the person deciding who the best candidate is, but it's more so the rating scale and the structured interview style that is determining who is the best candidate. Now, with an unstructured interview, you have a very high chance of bias because, once again, you know, we all have our bias without even knowing it. And so somebody is choosing the candidate based on personal preference, based on who they personally think is the best candidate. They don't have a rating scale. They don't have a standard way of looking at things. They have not asked the same questions to these people. And so that is where the bias comes in. Now we're going to talk about legal defensibility. So with structured interviews, you have a very high legal defensibility because you can say, I know that I did this in a very fair way because this is a structured interview. I ask these questions to every single candidate and I rate them based on this rating scale. And that is how I determined who is the best person for this job. So I know that I did it well. Now, with an unstructured interview, you can't pull on those resources. You can't say, these are the questions that I ask every single person. And based on, you know, these answers, I have created this benchmark answers that I'm looking for, and then I'm going to rate them based on this. You don't have that to back it up because really you're choosing based on your own personal preference. So somebody could say, well, really, they had a bias towards me before I even walked in the office. And based on how our conversation went, I felt like they weren't really hearing me about kind of type of job what type of job I could do, what kind of work I could offer. They weren't really hearing me about that. It seems like it was more about how they felt about me as a person. And so that is where somebody legally could have a case to say that they were discriminated against or they were not treated fairly. Next, we're going to look at flexibility. So with structured interviews, you have a very low flexibility. This is because um, it is structured. The questions are predetermined. You're not going to shy away from the questions that are being asked. And you're going to rate it with the scale. It's not going to be up to the person to decide. It's already predetermined based on using that rating scale. So with a unstructured interview, you have a very high level of flexibility though, because you're bringing people in. It is just based on whatever kind of questions the person wants to ask that day, whatever topics they want to cover, whatever kind of questions they want to ask. It just really depends. And so that allows for more flexibility. Next, we're going to talk about the candidate experience. Usually, most of the candidates will have a very consistent experience. They're all going to kind of experience the same thing because, once again, it is a structured interview. They're all going to be asked the same questions. They're all going to use the same rating scale. And so, this is going to create a very consistent experience. If they all were to be asked, what was your experience? Did you feel like it was fair? They would all probably say yes. Whereas with an unstructured interview, the candidate experience is going to vary because the person is going to decide what they want to talk about that day, what type of questions they want to ask, and things like this. And so that is going to end up having a wide variety of experiences. Is training required? So with structured interviews, there is moderate training required. This is because, you want to work with your team. You want to make sure that they know, okay, these are the questions that we're going to ask. This is what the benchmark responses look like. This is what, we're looking for these type of responses. We would like to see maybe an excellent or an above average or an average response. And so based on those categories, this is kind of the response that we're looking for. And if they meet those criteria, then this is the rating scale that we're going to apply to this type of question. But with unstructured interviews, you don't really need any training because once again, they're free flowing. It just kind of depends on what the person wants to ask the questions that day. And then usefulness in HR. So structured interviews have a very high level of usefulness because they help make sure that there is, defensibility, that there is a very low bias, that they're consistent. Whereas with an unstructured interview, they don't really have a lot of usefulness because they are not legally defensible. Um, they do bring in that bias risk. And these are things that you don't want for your company. When you're looking at HR, you want to hold to certain truths that you can say, yes, I operated under legal defensibility and I didn't have a bias. Those are things that are very important when you are working in HR. So now we're going to cover the legal purpose and the fairness of structured interviews. So structured interviews allow for legal defensibility. They follow a specific set of questions and a rubric that is used for all candidates, which shows a lack of bias because it is used by everybody. So It is very important when you are representing an HR team that you work in a way that you are making sure that you're being legally defensible for your company. It is important that you are following the legal qualifications that have been put in place. And so a structured interview really allows for you to say that you operated in fairness and you were following the law. So by having this specific set of questions and rubric that is used for all the candidates, then you are showing that you have a lack of bias, that you are operating in a way that is legally defensible because you are doing the same thing for every single candidate. And it's no longer the person deciding who is getting hired, but the rubric that has been put in place that is deciding who is being hired. And the rubric doesn't look at what does the person look like or, how old are they or anything like that. They look at the answer for who is the best person for the job. And so that is a way that you can be operate in legal defensibility and to be fair. So next, the questions created and asked tie directly into a specific skill set that is needed for the job. These questions are driven by situations and experience. These type of questions meet the standard of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, which is the federal agency that is responsible for enforcing the laws that make it illegal to discriminate in the workplace. So you're going to create a set of questions that talk specifically about situations or experiences that would be tied to the job that you are looking to hire for. So these questions are ones that aren't asking anything that's like personal or inappropriate for a job interview. These are questions that are specifically tied to what the job function is. And that is really important when you are trying to make sure that you're operating under legal defensibility. You want to be asking questions that are not personal or inappropriate. And so the questions that you're going to ask are going to tie directly into the job, and that makes sure that you are working under the Equal Opportunity Commission because you're not asking about, a person's race or their gender or anything like that that is not necessary for the job function. Structured interviews standardize the candidate experience, which allows for fairness. So this is something that is extremely important because you want to be sure that you are having a interview that is experienced by the same way by every single candidate. Because sometimes you may be hiring internally, and so you may have a situation where two coworkers are maybe in the break room and they're talking about the interview they had. And as they're talking about it, they realize, hey, we had the same exact interview. And even though one person got selected and the other person didn't, they walk away with the feeling of fairness. And that is extremely important because you don't want those two coworkers to have the opposite experience where they go into the break room and they both had this unstructured interview. They had completely different experiences. And one person realizes, hey, I wasn't treated fairly. I wasn't given a fair opportunity to receive this promotion because of how the interview took place. And so that is why you want to be sure that your company is using structured interviews because you want to be sure that everybody feels fairness. Because fairness is part of the key to being legally defensible, to be able to say everybody had the same experience. It was fair for everybody. And so another thing is structured interviews also predict better job success, which allows for decisions based on merit and fairness. So that was once again, I kind of talked about, the coworkers going into the break room, and we want to be sure that, um, we're giving a fair set of questions that really focuses in on what the job is. So these questions, they will predict who is the best candidate based on their situational and experiences um, that they have had, and it will show who the best person to select is. Once you apply the rating scale, once you apply the benchmark questions. So the next thing is the structured interview supports diversity, equality, and inclusion DEI goals. So one of the ways that it supports this is it removes the bias. So when you don't when you remove the bias, you are allowing yourself to hire more diverse candidates. You are looking to hire equally and to meet that equality, and you are looking to have inclusion and hire, all different types of diverse people, all different types of diverse candidates. And that is what the structured interview allows, because it is asking questions based on the job. It doesn't know what the person looks like, or what is their gender or anything like that. It's not focused on that. It's focused on specifically how would they perform the job? How would they handle the situations? What experience do they bring to the table? And that is what is important to be legally defensible and also fair. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the types of questions for structured interviews. So when you are doing structured interviews, there are two types of questions that you will be asking. The first type of question is a situation-based question. Situational-based questions assess how the candidate is likely to behave in a situation. So they are usually questions like, what would you do if? So these questions kind of put the candidate into a hypothetical situation, and based on this you are going to see, like, what is their behavior like, how do they perform under pressure, how do they perform in this situation, and it gives you a snapshot of potentially what you could see when they are in the job. Then the second type of question is an experience-based question. Experience-based questions ask the candidate to draw upon past experience from a previous job. They usually start with describe a time when, or give me an example of. So these questions are really great because they help you understand what was this person like in their past job. When they were handled with a tough situation, did they really go above and beyond, or did they kind of just do a lackluster job, which is not really what we're looking for. Obviously, we want them to go above and beyond and to really explain how they handled that situation. And so they could draw on even several different types of jobs that they've had and show how their skills can translate from one job to another. So what is a benchmark response? A benchmark response is a pre-written example of how the candidate should answer the questions. There is usually a rating scale which shows an excellent answer, an average answer, and a poor answer. This model will help the interviewer rate the response. So basically, when you're looking at benchmark responses, it is best to have 5 potential responses. So we're going to look at an excellent answer, an above average answer, an average answer, and then a below average answer and a poor answer. And we're going to go ahead, and so we will have our question, then we will have the answers that we're kind of looking for, all the way to the answer that we don't really want. And so based on how the candidate answers, you can kind of look at the answers that you already have selected and see, well, where does their response match up? Is it in the excellent category? did it really hit all these marks that I'm looking for? Or maybe did it not really hit a lot of the marks that I'm looking for and it's a poor answer? Okay, so now we're going to look at an example of a benchmark response. So I'm going to give a question that I would ask as the interviewer, and then I'm going to show the benchmark response for an excellent example, an above average example, an average example, and a below average example, and a poor example. So the question that would be asked is, two employees have been in an ongoing conflict and it is beginning to affect their job performance as well as their team's job performance. How would you resolve this situation in a way that resolved the conflict but also kept fairness in mind and helped rectify the low job performance? So an excellent response would be, I would document what has occurred and get statements from both employees. Then I would mediate the situation. We would have a discussion about what situations we could reach to ensure fairness and better productivity. I would make sure I also followed up so that the solutions were working. The interviewee provides a response that includes documentation, their strategy, follow up, and prevention methods. So that's why it's excellent, because they have went above and beyond. They have their documentation, they have a strategy that they're going to use. They followed up with the employees, which is extremely important. And they also even gave them prevention methods. How in the future can we prevent this? And above average responses, I would mediate the situation. I would allow both sides a chance to speak. We would work together to find the solution to the problem so that each side felt heard. This would create fairness. Once a solution was reached, we would tackle productivity by coming up with a way to fix the problem. So in this answer, the interviewee would provide a clear step-by-step strategy that addresses both fairness and productivity. So these are important. They're giving a step-by-step strategy here, which is something that is above average. It's going above what we would expect. In average responses, I would act as a mediator in an HR setting. So in this response, they realize that mediation needs to take place and they want to help, but they don't really expand beyond that. This is an okay answer. They obviously know what needs to be done, but they're not really going above and beyond. They don't have any step-by-step strategies. They don't really have any documentation. They don't have any prevention methods for the future. So it's just okay. Below average. I'd ask them why they are fighting. I'd try to get them to get along. The interviewee seems to realize that there's a problem but gives a basic solution without much thought. There is no solution on how to fix the low job performance or how to keep fairness in mind. So they don't really plan to really handle this situation in any way. They're just going to throw in just a basic answer of, hey, try to get along, guys, which isn't really a way that we're looking to fix the problem in the future. There's no way to remedy the low productivity and the fighting. A poor response is, I'd let them work it out amongst themselves. The interviewee provides a very vague answer and doesn't give a solution that involves any strategy. So letting people work it out amongst themselves hasn't been working. So just continuing to do the same thing is madness. And it's not the answer that anybody would be looking for, because they're not pulling on those strategies. They're not giving a solution. They're not offering any sort of help. There's nothing here to help the people that are in need. What is a 1 to 5 rating scale? A 1 to 5 rating scale is a system designed to evaluate a candidate's response in a structured interview. This rating scale allows the interviewer to evaluate the answers both objectively and fairly. So this rating scale is, when used in conjunction with benchmark response, really helps the interviewer decide who is the best person for the job. So an excellent response is going to get a 5. This means that the answer far exceeds the expectations. An above average answer is going to get a 4. This means that the answer exceeds expectations. An average answer is going to get a 3. This means that the answer meets expectations. A below average answer is going to get a 2. This means that the answer only partially meets the expectations. And a poor answer is going to get a 1. This means that the answer does not meet expectations. So basically, how you would utilize this 1 to 5 rating scale is, you're going to ask them a series of questions. Let's say you ask the person that you're interviewing 4 questions. So each question is going to have a benchmark response that is going to have a 5 to 1 rating scale. And based on the answers, let's say they give 2 excellent answers and 2 below average answers. So their total score would be 14, which, 14 isn't an excellent across the board. It's because the highest you could get would be 20. So it's okay. It's not terrible, but there may be somebody who gets let's say they get a 19 and they're the highest score. So they are obviously the best person for the job. And that is who you would select based on the structured interview method. And that is, once again, another way that is removing the bias. It is allowing the person to select the person based on what is fair, what is legally defensible. And so that is why the rating scale is really an awesome tool that you can use in your company. So now we're going to do a structured question exercise. So in this section, we will utilize the breakout rooms, and those breakout rooms will select the group that you're in. You and your group will need to create 2 situational based questions and 2 experience based questions. So you have to remember that the situational based questions are asking, what would you do if? And then you have the experience based questions that are drawing upon that past knowledge. Give me an example of a time when you did this, or tell me about a time when you were at work and this happened. So you need 2 of each type. And then you will have 10 minutes to create these questions. And then you need to pick one person in your group to share the questions that you have created once the break rooms are over. We will talk about, we'll listen to everybody present the questions that they came up with. And we can talk about, are these good examples of situational based questions or experience based questions going forward? So at this point, I would use the breakout room tool that is in Zoom. And this would kind of break everybody into different groups. The good thing about this is that when you use the breakout rooms, you can, as the host, you can go into each breakout room and listen in. You'll listen in, ask if they have any questions, if they need any help, and you can provide the guidance that is needed during these 10 minutes. So that each group can be successful and can come up with 2 situational based questions and 2 experience based questions that they feel pride in presenting to the training group as a whole. And then based on that, once you've kind of went to each breakout room, the 10 minutes would probably be up, and I would move everybody out of their break rooms, and then we would begin having each group present their questions. During this time, everybody would listen, but they could also type comments in the chat. And we could kind of look at them, if they had something that they wanted to say, they could type it in the chat while people are presenting, and then we can go back and say, well, this person had this comment to say about the question that you came up with, or they thought you could improve in this way. And then this would open up some discourse that would allow people to kind of think more about, is this really a good situational based question? Is this an experience based question that's good? And they're also hearing other groups' opinions and thoughts. And so it may allow them to think about things that they wouldn't have thought of previously, which is also really good. And it may give them some ideas to take back to their company for questions that they want to use in their own company with their own jobs that they are hiring for, which is really important. So now we're going to look at benchmark responses and a rating scale practice. So once again, we're going to use the breakout rooms to work in small groups. Each group, and these are going to be the groups that we have already worked with. So you're going back to that group, you're building upon what you have already created, which is the 2 questions. So you're gonna select one of the questions that you previously came up with. Pick your favorite question, the one that you guys feel most confident about, the one that you would feel pride in taking to your company and saying, this is something that I came up with in training. I think it's a really great question. It's something that we could also use in structured interviews. And at this point, you're going to create a benchmark response and a rating scale for the question that you select. So you got to remember that you need to have 5 responses. So you need to have, what do you think an excellent response looks like? What does an above average response look like? What does an average response look like? What does a below average response look like? And what does a poor response look like based on that question? And then, you're going to have your rating scale, which is 5 for excellent, 4 for above average, 3 for average, 2 for below average, and 1 for poor. So once you get that created, you'll have 10 minutes to do that, working together to kind of nail out what you want to say. And then each group will once again need to pick a representative. It can be the same person as before, or you can pick somebody new. It just depends on what you want to do, to read out the benchmark responses to this training group and to and the rating scale created. So at this point, I would once again move everybody back into the breakout rooms that they have on Zoom. They would begin working in their small groups. And once again, the great thing about the breakout rooms is that the host can jump into the different groups. They can, provide feedback. They can ask if there's any questions that are needed from the group. They can help where, if somebody has a question or the group has a question or they're not sure about something, before they are presenting, their responses to the group, they can kind of ask, what do you think about this, or anything like that. And within the 10 minutes, I would go to as many small groups as I can to make sure that they felt, once again, pride in what they're presenting, and that they feel like they have a good understanding of the benchmark response and the rating scale. So after this, the 10 minutes would have elapsed, and I would be able to bring everybody out of the breakout rooms, and everybody could present their projects. We could, not their projects, excuse me, their benchmark responses and rating scales. And we could discuss, what do we like about what the people have presented? What could they work on? What things could they tweak a little bit? So that once again, They have a better understanding of what benchmark responses look like, and they have applied their knowledge into a exercise that they can take back to their company. They can use it. They have um, they have created something that they're proud of, and they feel confident in the knowledge that they have gained through this training exercise. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is scoring practice. So I'm going to ask a question that I would ask as an interviewer. Then I'm going to tell you the answer that the candidate supplied the interviewer with. So the question that I would ask as the interviewer is, tell me about a time when you had to handle a disciplinary action of an employee. What steps did you take and what was the outcome? And the candidate answered in this manner. They said, there was a time when an employee had missed too many days. I explained to them what the company's attendance policy was. I explained to them that going forward, they could not miss any more days until the new year mark when they would receive more days. They were given a written warning, which showed that I explained to them what the policy was. Okay, so we're going to continue with the scoring practice because there's another part to this, and it is the benchmark answers and rating scale. So based on the um, answer that was given by the candidate, we would then compare that answer to the benchmark answers and the rating scale. So this is the benchmark answer and rating scale that was created for the previous question. So a poor answer would be, I can't really think of any specific examples. The interviewer has no experience or provides very vague examples. A below average answer is, I have handled discipline issues before. I just try to be fair. The interviewer gives a very vague example. They do not have experience, but cannot expand. They have experience, but they cannot expand upon it. An average answer is, I had an employee who was missing too many days. We just went over the attendance policy. The interviewee had a basic example with a basic disciplinary action. The 4 is above average. There was an employee who had missed 5 days of work. The company's policy was that 6 absences resulted in termination. We went over the policy and formed a plan to improve their attendance. The interviewee provides an example that has a solution, and they show that they were able to not only understand the company's policy, but help the employees. 5 is an excellent answer. There was an employee who had missed 5 days of work. The company's policy was that 6 absences resulted in termination. We went over the company's policy on attendance. I was able to show them how to offer certain days up on the company's website so that other employees could work a day that they needed off. I was also able to show them how they could save up more PTO. The interviewee provides a detailed example that has numerous solutions so that the employee can be successful. So these are the benchmark answers that have been created to apply it to what the candidate answered. So, for an excellent answer, we're looking for something that provides a detailed example that has numerous solutions so that we know that the employee is going to be set up to be successful. Whereas like with an above average answer, the interviewee provides an example that has a solution, but and they do understand the policy, the company's policy, and they help the employee, but they don't really help them have numerous solutions so that they can be successful. And an average answer is just, it's very basic. Um, and they kind of talk about disciplinary action, but they don't really help them in the future. They don't really give them ways to be successful. They don't go above and beyond. There isn't really any sort of follow-up plan, like how are they going to reach out to the employee in the future or anything like that. A below average answer is something where, it's very vague. They have experience. You can tell that maybe they have had this experience before, but they can't really expand upon it. And they can't really think of ways to help the person. And then a poor answer is there is no experience. They have a vague example. And that's not really what we're looking for. So let's go back to the previous slide here for a second. And we're going to look at the candidate's answer. So there was a time, when the employee had missed too many days. So once again, they're going back to their experience that they have previously had. So this would be an experience-based question, and they're saying that they explained what the company's policy was, which is great. That means that they know their company's policy. They can draw upon it. They can tell the person that they're talking to about it. And they explain to them going forward they could not miss any more days. So once again, they're explaining that the company's policy, and they're telling them that they have to wait till the new year mark to get their more days. And then they're also given a written warning so that they know. So there's the documentation portion of it. So based on this response, let's go to the next slide. So now you're going to break out into your breakout rooms. Your group will have 10 minutes to review the question and answer that I read. Then you will use the benchmark answers and rating scale to score this answer. Once the 10 minutes are over, you'll have a representative read out the score you gave and why. So you're going to go and look, you're going to use the benchmark answers. You're going to decide how you feel that they did. Are you going to give them an excellent, above average, average, below average, or poor? So at this point, I would have them go into their breakout rooms. Once again, I will go into each room, kind of listen in, see what they're thinking, see if they have any questions that they need to ask, or, do they need any sort of guidance? I will go check on everybody within those 10 minutes, and then, make sure that they have their representative selected, that they're ready to go forward with sharing with the training group their plans, what they plan to talk about. And then we would go back and we would discuss what we have decided. So that's what I will do in this portion. So based on kind of what I'm hearing everybody say, we have landed on that this is an above average answer, and I would agree with that, because they have provided a solution, which is, hey, when the new year rolls around, you're going to get more days, and so that is going to allow you to kind of take time off. You may and that will give them the days that they need to be successful throughout the next year. They also mentioned the company policy. They said this is what the policy is. They even had them sign a piece of paper acknowledging that they understand what the company's policy is. So there's documentation there. But it's not something that's really excellent. And the reason for that is because they didn't have numerous solutions. Their solution was just kind of wait until the next year to be successful. I mean, wait until the next year so you'll have more days. They don't have a follow-up plan. They don't plan to meet up with the person later to make sure that they're on the right path, that they feel like they can be successful. And especially when you know that your company has other policies, like maybe they have a way that they can save up more PTO. Um, because some companies, depending on the day you go in, if you may be able to earn a little bit of more extra PTO that day. So that is something that they could make them aware of. Also, some companies may have policies in place where if they trade days with somebody, they could get off a day that they need. And that is something that you should let the person know so that they can be successful moving forward. So, um, one thing about a lot of companies is that they try to put things in place to help people be successful, but you have to be sure that the person is aware of those tools to be successful. And that is how you would get an excellent answer is you're going above and beyond. You're making sure that they have all the tools to be successful. You're following up with them. You're giving them any documentation that they need. You're making sure that you're documenting things. You're making sure that they're aware of the policies put in place. And these are ways that you can really have an excellent answer in an interview. Okay, so the next thing that I want to cover is a 30-day plan to implement the structured interviews. So this 30-day plan is a way that you can take what you have learned in this class and you can implement it into your company. Now, I have sent everybody an email that includes this 30-day plan that you can take to your company. You can print it out. You can use it in any way that you need to. This breaks it down into 4 weeks. So it's also broken up in a way that can help you be successful. It's not just, a plan that is just kind of thrown your way. This is broken down into steps, which I find is really important for success. So during the first week, you're going to finalize your interview guides. So these are going to be the questions that you plan to ask. And you're going to kind of formulate your questions. What do you want to answer? What do you want to ask that is really going to help you understand if this person is able to handle the job? So you also want to make sure that you have experience-based questions and situational-based questions because that is what is really important to structured interviews. So coming up with several of those types of questions that really allow the person to showcase their knowledge and their ability and their past experience. The second thing you're going to do during week 1 is you're going to train your HR team. So you're going to, kind of get them understanding, hey, we're going to be doing structured interviews and, letting them come up with questions and help you guys. The third thing is you're going to select a job to pilot. So this is the job that you're going to decide, okay, we need to really hire for this job. So we want to have our structured interviews be geared towards the specific job that we're going to try to fill. Week 2, you're going to develop a scoring rubric and you're going to create benchmark questions. So these are going to be, you're going to take the questions from your interview guide that you had previously, and you're going to create these benchmark questions and answers. So what kind of answers are you looking for? What do you feel is an excellent answer? What is an average answer? What is a poor answer to the questions that you're asking? You're also going to develop documentation to help rate and score interviews. So you're going to come up with a grid or some sort of a sheet that allows them to, okay, write down how the person answered. And you're going to be able to compare that to the benchmark answers off to the side and say, okay, maybe I would give this answer a 5 because it's really excellent, but this one, it's just average, so it's a 3. And then this will allow them to kind of add it up and give it a score. And so it's really important to have these papers to help people be organized when they're doing their structured interview. During week 3, you're going to host a 1-hour training session. This is going to get people up to speed on what are structured interviews, giving them the terminology that they need so that they understand what a benchmark question is, and they understand a scoring rubric, and they understand what they're going to be utilizing in these structured interviews. You also want them to become acquainted with the documentation that they need, and things like this. So during that 1-hour training session, you're going to be doing that. You're also going to be, going over different hands-on experiences so that they can create their own benchmark questions maybe in the future, or develop their own scoring rubric. You're also going to send out necessary job aids. These are going to be things that help people be successful in structured interviews. And you're going to provide practice scenarios. So the best way to learn is to practice. This helps people get to feeling comfortable with the new thing that they're going to be doing, which is structured interviews. They may have never done this before. And so having practice scenarios helps them feel confident in what they're doing in the future. Week 4, you're going to begin your structured interviews. So this is going to be the first time that you're doing the real thing. They're going to be actually looking at potential candidates for the job that you have decided to pilot. And they're going to also be collecting feedback. So this feedback could come from the candidate. How did they feel about the structured interview that they went on? Did they feel like it was a positive experience? Did they feel like the interviewer did a good job? Did they feel like it was fair? You could also get feedback by allowing somebody to go into the room and also kind of be there during the structured interview, somebody from the company that already works there, and they could collect feedback. They could let them know what they did great, what they could improve on. And you're going to make necessary changes. So based on the feedback that you receive, you're going to implement that, and that is going to give you a really structured, I mean, a really structured interview plan going forward. It's going to help you be successful. Okay, so now at this point, I would have a post-session survey. I would use this on Google Forms, and they would be able to go to Google Forms and fill out this post-session survey. So the post-session survey just allows me to have feedback about the training session. Do they think that it was a positive experience? And based on that, you could utilize that in the future on ways on how to improve the training session. So I'm going to go ahead and read the questions that would be in the post-session survey. So the first question is, how satisfied were you with the overall training? This is on a scale from very satisfied to very dissatisfied, and they would select, how they felt. The thing about these questions is they can't elaborate, but it does kind of give you a very brief overview of what people felt. How likely are you to recommend the training to others? So it's a scale of highly likely to highly unlikely. How relevant was this training to your job? This is just extremely relevant or not relevant at all. How clear was the training? Was it very clear or not very clear? How effective and clear was the facilitator at explaining things? Very clear or not very clear? And then the last thing that would be the quiz. So the quiz just once again is kind of confirming that people learned something from the training, that they took away what you were hoping to teach them. So this quiz would also once again be done on Google Forms. but this would be structured a little bit differently because the blanks would not have any sort of answer that they would select. These would have blanks that they would fill in, write out a response. So the first question is, what is a structured interview? Give an example of a situational based question. Give an example of an experience based question. What is a benchmark question and what is a 1 to 5 rating scale? And they would turn this in at the end, and it would kind of be a way to see if you were successful in your training. So this concludes my training manual, and I want to thank everybody for attending. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And this is even extended into the future. So thank you guys.